If you're familiar at all with the story, you've probably heard that the lone woman was found in a brush-covered hut on San Nicolas Island. And this is often misconstrued to be a house where she lived for 18 years. And if you read the accounts carefully, you'll see that Nother and Dittman both equate this hut to ones they had seen elsewhere on the island. And the other ones they very clearly define as not houses, but as windbreaks. These do not have solid walls, they don't have a solid roof, some don't have a roof at all. So it's not really a house, but it is a windbreak, which is very convenient since she was on the top of a sand dune at the west end of the San Nicolas Island, about the windiest place you're going to find. Having a windbreak is very whatsoever, but it's not really a good place to be living, right? Especially when it's winter and it's rainy and miserable and cold. If there was a cave on the island, you'd much rather be in a cave than be in a brush-covered hut on the west end of San Nicolas Island. And in fact, the accounts very clearly early on say that she actually had lived in a cave nearby where she had been found. And it didn't take long before people were going out to the island and seeing this cave. So the information was readily available. People had gone out to find it, had found it, perhaps had removed some artifacts from it. We don't get a good indication from any of these accounts as to where this cave was, but there is clearly a cave out there, and perhaps there are even two caves, one of which the lower right one, I believe, mentions that one of the caves have some artwork in it, which we will talk about in a moment. And we also have some artifacts, as I said, that these were possibly, we're not sure, but these look like they might have been recovered from a cave, just because the condition, they're wooden artifacts, and the condition is so good, it's kind of hard to imagine that they were in an open air site. But we don't really know. But these were collected about that time period, so the time period would be about right if they were actually from a cave. And the preservation is extraordinary on these wooden items, which would be consistent with it being found in a cave. But at any rate, this is talk about this cave on the island. And Lorenzo Yates even conveniently gives us a photograph of the cave. Right? Wrong. If you look at it, and if you're familiar with San Nicolas Island, you'll realize very quickly that the geology is completely wrong for San Nicolas Island. Okay. The article that this photo comes out of talks about a number of the islands, so I'm pretty sure when they put the title on the photo, they just got the wrong island identified. But I've been assured, and I've checked this with geologists even, and say, no, that definitely does not look like it could be on San Nicolas Island at all. So yeah, it was a nice try, but didn't quite work out. We do have one cave, however, that's fairly well known, and it does have artwork, pictographs and petroglyphs. It's known as the Cave of the Whales. And people often ask me, well, maybe she was living in the Cave of the Whales. Well, if you look at where the Cave of the Whales is located, you're not going to want to live there. The entrance is down at this level here. It's a very wet, very cold place to be. You would not want to live there. There's no really floor to it. There's all these slippery rocks because they're covered with algae, and seaweed gets washed in there all the time, and animals go in there all the time. It's not a place where you'd want to be living. To go on occasion, sure, but to live there, no, not really. Boom. So that leaves us with a problem, and the problem being there is no such cave on San Nicolas Island. The island has been covered by archaeologists repeatedly. A number of well-known archaeologists even have surveyed the island. This is Bruce Bryan's work from 1926, but Malcolm Rogers was out in 1930, Arthur Woodward in 1939, Phil Orr in 1945, Clem Meehan in 1953, Fred Ryman in 1984, Pat Martz in 2002, they've all surveyed the island and no one has found any such cave. So that leaves us with a little bit of a problem of there's a cave, but there isn't a cave. So I've been, very interested in this question. Obviously there was a cave. Everybody seems to have agreed and people have gone out and saw it. So it's got to be out there somewhere, but where? The only clue we have from the accounts is that it's near where she was found. And of course, what does near mean? In feet or yards or miles? That's, we don't know. We have no real clue. But looking at the historical record of the island, we start to get some clues that key us in on where this cave actually is. And this is a coast survey map of San Nicolas Island from 1879. And this is really interesting. The Coast Survey came out, and at that time they had a program, the mapping the coastline up and down to facilitate trade and navigation and whatnot. And since San Nicolas Island was a government-owned island, they paid a little more attention. So there is a onshore version of the map, and there's an offshore version of the map. And they both have slightly different details when it comes to the shoreline. Oop, we'll go there. Now this is the offshore version of the map. And as you can see, there is a spot there marked as cave, which, oh, that sounds great. But if you look at the symbology there, these are the survey stations. This is where they would set up their equipment, and they would shoot from one point to the next point and measure the distance from one point to the next point to be able to draw the map of the island. But the cool thing is, when they name these sites, and they're all named, there's thousands of them up and down the coast, the name means something, okay? For example, on San Nicolas Island, we have other points that were named shack, because there was a shack nearby, or fence, because there was an old sheep fence nearby. So the fact that it's named cave is indicative of there's something in the vicinity that might warrant such a name. Now, unfortunately, this is near the Cave of the Whales. So is the cave of the whales? Don't know. So it took quite a while for us to finally track down the on-island portion in large enough size that we could actually look at it. And on this one, we see the cave survey station, but we also see a little place name there marked as Indian Cave. Now this is very intriguing, and this Indian Cave is not the location of Cave of the Whales. So this tells us, oh, maybe there is a second cave, and perhaps this is the cave that they're talking about. Very, very cool. Come on, there it goes. However, it's not that simple. It would have been real nice to just walk with the map out and go, oh, here it is. But if you notice on the map, they showed a couple of little coves there, and the cave is at the head of one of those coves. Well, and in reality, there are all kinds of little coves in this area. So then you're faced with the problem of which one did they decide to draw, which one didn't they draw. It's too small, you can't really try to scale it out, so that's not going to work too well. So we went out, and over the years, and this started about 20 years ago, we went out to all these little cove areas, and there's one that always looked the most likely because, one, the geology, which you can't really see on the sides, is very substantial. It looked good. And then, of course, it's got this little overhang right here, which leads one to think, ooh, there it is, right there, right? Well, let's go. Unfortunately, if you look at that little overhang, it doesn't go anywhere. That didn't help us any at all, I'm afraid. So periodically over the years, I would go out and look at the area, maybe dig little auger holes, and these 5 different spots where there might have been a cave, and we never pulled up anything that would indicate there's any habitation here. And with a cave, typically you would have habitation in the cave, but you'd also have evidence of habitation outside the cave. So we didn't have to be right on it, but if we're in the vicinity, we figure we ought to be able to find some evidence of the cave being there, even with a real small little auger hole. It wouldn't take a whole lot. But we'd go out and find nothing, and then I'd ponder it and go back out again a little bit later and find nothing, and we try the other 3 and find nothing. And this kind of went on year after year after year. Just couldn't find anything, but knew it had to be out there somewhere. Well, this all changed about 2 years ago. I was just contacted totally out of the blue by Scott Byram, who's a researcher at UC Berkeley. And Scott tells me that, well, gee, you know, they've got the field notes that go along with those surveys. And he is asking me, there's another site down here, in the field notes, there's a real nice description, there's a drawing of a big shell mound, and he wanted to know if I had any information on that particular site. Was there a current site number for it? What did it look like today? So I sent him back that information, and at the end I said, oh, and by the way, does there happen to be anything in the notes about a cave? And he writes back and goes, well, yeah, there is. I was going to bring that up later. And so we got to talking back and forth, and Scott was kind enough to provide me a copy of the pertinent pages from the field notes. Okay, and as you can see in the field notes, this is identified as the Lone Woman's Cave, very clearly. So at least we can say, now these guys weren't there when the Lone Woman was found, but certainly they've been told. We know on some of their earlier trips out to the islands, they actually had George Nicolas as the captain on the boat, so they probably had access to some of the information that was going around at the time. And it was fairly, at least seemed reasonably common knowledge that this was her cave, all right? And here, everything is talking, they're talking about the survey station and things from the survey station, so it gives us a distance from the survey station to the cave of about 100 yards. All right. And then on the next page is a nice detailed map which gives us compass bearing. So we've got a compass bearing and we've got a distance. And we've got the cave survey station, which, you know, doesn't actually, is not a physical thing there anymore, but we can pretty well approximate where it falls because we can triangulate it with the other survey stations, and some of those are somewhat still known or visible. You know, they're all within line of sight, so you can kind of figure out about where it is, and from that, with a compass bearing and a distance, you can figure out about where the cave actually was at the time. And it pointed back to that same spot with the overhang. Okay. And so we go back out to the same spot with the overhang. So we say, okay, this is it. So we start digging holes, and what do we find? Nothing. And I remember Renee and his students were there, and I can remember at one point Renee and I going off to the side by ourselves, and we pulled out the map, and we're going, is this the right place? You know, are you sure it's right? And we're both going, yeah, it's got to be the right place. It's got to be the right place. It just, for some, it must be deeper. It just got to be. It's got to be here. And so as we finally dug down deep enough, we finally get down past that ledge to where it starts to open up into a cave. Okay. This is much deeper than we had ever expected that we would go. The surface that we started with, this is that little opening, so that's the surface we started at. So you got to go down a good 1.5 meters or so before you can get to this. And let's see if I can go back a little bit. One of the other issues is this is all actually sandstone, and the cave's filled with sand, and it all looks the same. When you're looking at it, you cannot distinguish the difference in it. It isn't until, I believe I asked one of the students, well, what's against that back wall now? And he stuck his trowel in. You know, oh, it's soft now. And it had been hard, and all of a sudden it's soft. So that told us that, oh my God, we've come down on something. There's something here. There is, in fact, a cave here, or at least an opening to something here. And just for scale, Kevin's about, what, 6'5" at least? He's a big guy, 6'6". So you can see this is where the overhang starts, and that's 6'6", down to where he's standing. And this is where we first found something that really started to clinch things for us. This is where we found this bottle. Okay, and this is a very cool bottle because, you know, they're very distinctive and they're made during a very discrete time period. This contained what's often called pepper sauce, which at the time, it was kind of the salsa ketchup of the time. And if you're on these ships, most of the food you're getting is very, very bland. It's salted meat. It's really terrible stuff. So they would have this stuff on ships to spice up the food so it had some flavor. And they're used commonly in all around the West at that time in mining camps and all over the place. But it's got a fairly tight time frame as to when it's being occupied. And if you notice the dates, that it kind of overlaps pretty nicely with the time the lone woman was on the island, which again was 1835 to 1853. So you got a nice overlap there. This really got us excited, thinking, oh my God, this is it. And so we had kind of expected that that bottle is probably down at the bottom of the cave and didn't have far to go. So we decided, well, we're going to have to kind of open up and get an access ramp to get down, because we're getting down pretty deep into the ground, and we need to be safe and have easy access to come in. So we start going in and really start working. And one of the first things we discover in the cave is this inscription. All right. And this, it's interpreted on the bottom. It's got a very specific date of 1911, okay, which is very interesting. Unfortunately, by this time, there's lots of people going out to the island, so it's not like a real easy to identify, but there's certainly a possibility we can identify the individual from the date and the initials. We haven't been able to do that so far, but there is, just right near the mouth of the cave, there is evidence that there's some kind of a little impromptu fishing camp there, which could easily have been occupied at this time. So that was very, very good. And the other thing that really kind of started to pique our interest was, if you know the story a little bit, in some of the accounts, the lone woman in her cave was supposed to have kept track of events by marking them on the walls. So this is telling us, well, if she marked things on the wall, they might very well still be intact, even if the cave has completely been filled in. They might still be there if they were engraved in. So that's a very good, the preservation's looking really good at this point in time. So we dig a little further and deeper into the cave, and we find another inscription on the exact same day. So we know there's two individuals there in September 11th, 1911, which tells us a couple of things. And this is it's quite a bit deeper down. So it's telling us, one, that the preservation in the cave is pretty good, because we're still not seeing anything resembling occupation at this level. We're just seeing sand. We haven't gotten anywhere. We're well below the depth where the bottle was found. The bottle was just kind of there, and there's like nothing below it other than sand. So we were kind of quite surprised at the fact that the bottle wasn't sitting down at the bottom. So somehow it kind of got added in a little bit later. Somehow it was there, but got moved around a little bit later and ended up there where it was. But this is telling us that the preservation is really good. And we've got some interesting things we can look at, try to track down who these people actually are. That would be kind of a fun thing to do. And so we continue to dig deeper down and further back. And as you can see, Renee's still standing on sand. There's no evidence of occupation. There's really nothing there. We start to pursue that. The second inscription is right up here. So you can see now we're well below that. At this point, we're down, probably about 5 meters from where we started, I would guess, at this point. And as you can see, this inscription is pretty much, if Rene were to stand up, he could maybe just barely make that. So maybe that's telling us that the cave was already partially filled in by 1911, which would be very, very good, right? It would be, if it was already capped off by then, that means that what's underneath is still going to be intact. So that was very, very promising information to get. So we continue to dig back even further and further into the cave, and we get to a point, now so far the cave is completely filled in with sediment, but we get back to a point where it actually opens up into a cavity. And what happens is that the roof of the cave has a low spot, but behind the low spot, the sediment that's coming in from outside doesn't get to. So behind that low spot now there's an actual cavity. And we're able to look up over that cavity, and all we can see is dark. It's not, another couple of feet. It's not a couple more meters. It's going way, way back. And we get one of these little laser measuring things, and it's like, oh boy, that's 4 or 5 more meters. Oh no, this thing is getting really big, way bigger than we ever imagined we could have out there. And just to give you a little idea on how big this cave is. One, it is an actual cave because it's dark in the back. The sunlight doesn't penetrate back that far. But there are, I'm counting at least 6, if not 7 people in that photo. I can't quite tell if there's a person over here, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in there, and you can see we're not crowded in there. It's really quite a large cave, and it's not fully opened up yet. I mean, there's still more sediment filling in this cave that we're still trying to remove. And one of the things we have done is we've left this pillar of sediment in the back. As you can see, these are all very, very fine little layers of sediment that have come in, okay? And so this will allow us to, at later time, to dissect that and understand the history of the filling of the cave, to understand the environmental history of the island. And in looking at these, we can tell that a lot of the sediment blew in from the mouth of the cave, but there's also sediment that washed in from back inside the cave. There's waterborne sediments and windborne sediments in there interweaving within themselves, and there does appear to perhaps be some spots up in the roof back here where water might have penetrated at one time or another. But it's very good to see that all this is all completely intact. No one has been in here, no one's dug in here, no one's messed around with it at all for all these years. But it's also a little disconcerting that in 150 years this much sediment has built up. This is a lot of sediment to build up in a very short period of time. It's good for the preservation, but it's disconcerting to think that, you know, there could be other stuff out there that's buried that deeply that we're never find unless we find a clue like this that'll lead us to them. At this point, there is still another cavity in the back of the cave that we know of. So it goes back another few more meters at the very least, and this wall here is about, I would say about 75 feet from the entrance. So it's already a very substantial cave. It's going back even further, and it's kind of narrowing down here, but it kind of looks like it may open up again a little bit beyond that. So it may be a very, very substantial cave. And one of the real interesting things that we think about is the bigger the cave is, the more likely it was to have been occupied earlier too, not just during the lone woman's time, but everybody who came before her. And so we're really excited at the possibility that this may have the whole, you know, human history of the island in there. This is such a large, substantial cave that the first people out there probably would have found it, and they would have used it too. I mean, there's no reason you wouldn't want to use this. It's a very incredibly good location. So this is about the best view I can get of the current state of things. And it's just an estimate of 40,000 buckets. We haven't counted them. But this has all been back-breaking, handwork, shovel the bucket, and a bucket line to get the stuff out of the way. And I think someone estimated 40,000 buckets. It's probably on the order of 1 million pounds of sand that's been moved out of that. And that's all by hand. It's all by student help. We've had a really incredible crew. We go out there for 3 or 4 days at a time, and it's nothing but just moving buckets all day, every day. And but it's been great. The crew has been just right in there, and we can't keep them down. They keep going and going and going. So I've got to really put out a big thanks to all the crew who have helped on this to date. And the amount of work and the energy that they put into this is phenomenal. I think they understand the importance of this, and so they're more than willing to chip in and do it. But it is hard, back-breaking work, and we've had a few of us have gone down for the count because of it, with elbows and knees and this and that. But it's important and exciting enough to keep going for sure. So I'm thinking about what can we actually say about this at this point in time. One, I think we can say that the location is very consistent with the historical accounts. Okay, this is indeed near where she was found. This is within, less than 2 miles from where she was found. So I would consider that to be near in the general terms. People at the time certainly believed that this was her cave. I think that the notes from the Coast Survey kind of confirmed that they knew it, and this is stuff that they had been told and maybe even were shown where this was. So this is fairly common knowledge that this was her cave at the time. The cave is way bigger than we had ever expected. This is way bigger than any other cave. San Nicolas being primarily sandstone, caves don't generally last very long because the sandstone is not that substantial. It doesn't last that well. And most of the caves we do have are active sea caves. And of course, one, they're not conducive for habitation, and two, they erode very rapidly and change very rapidly. This is a sea cave, but it's old enough that it's been uplifted, so it's up above the water level. So it's a good 15 or 20 feet above the water level. So it's good and dry all the time, and it just happens to have survived. It is formed along a fault line. In fact, if you go in the cave, you can see the fault right in the ceiling. You're looking right into the fault. Which is how it formed, a typical sea cave formation, but it's up high enough that it's a good solid cave for us for once. The integrity of everything we've seen so far is excellent. The fact that it's totally filled in is such a good sign, it's unbelievable. The fact that oops, you know what, did I miss a slide? I think I did miss a slide. I did not, I had a slide. Disappeared somewhere. I screwed up. What I was going to show you is that underneath the tarp here is the occupation layer. We came down onto an actual occupation layer, which is dark gray black soil with shell, bone, and stone embedded in it. Okay. Now there is some sheep bone mixed in with that, so even that's a little bit later, which is even better because what's underneath it is still intact. And we haven't, excavated down into that at this point in time, but it is definitely there. We need to get the bulk of the material out of the way. We don't want to be carrying buckets and buckets of stuff over that kind of a deposit. So we wanted to, get everything cleared out before we attempted to do anything with that. But that is, something that we're considering doing once we can. So I'm missing 2 slides. What the heck did I do? The other one, which I was supposed to have shown, boy, did I screw up on this one, was that this is a very, very good location. I had a shot from the cave looking the other way out to the ocean. You can see this is in a nice little cove. There is intertidal habitat right smack dab in front. There's seagrass beds right in front. There are kelp beds right in front of that. It's a nice little protected little cove. And the thing we have found, no matter how windy and miserable it is, if you drop down into the cave, it's nice and comfortable and warm. You don't even need a fire to be nice and comfortable in there. It's really great, and even when it's been raining, it's totally dry inside. So it is. If you had your choice, this is where you're going to live on the island. There's no doubt about it. And of course, at this point, I can say I'm probably 90% sure that this is the lone woman's cave, but we can't say that absolutely yet. We do need some confirming data in the terms of actually getting samples from that occupation layer and dating it. And the dating would be, we do radiocarbon, of course, but also we'd be looking at a mix of Nicoleño and historic artifacts. There may be some Native Alaskan artifacts mixed in there because that's in that same time period. We would expect to see those different types of things happening at that particular time period. And but everything looks very good. I think we've got it, but I can't say 100%. Hopefully the next time around I'll be able to say 100%, but this is definitely looking good. And just the whole quest to find this was quite a journey in itself. So thank you very much.